Hello everyone, my name is Kimberly Hayes Pollard. I'm the president and CEO of WE Strategies and an advisor to WISE Zambia, Women's Initiatives that Strengthen and Empower. Today with me is Ingrid Nielsen, who serves on the board of WISE. We really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all and to share the amazing work that WISE is doing. I think this is a great setup to be able to talk about some of the things that are happening both domestically and globally to empower women and girls. So we'll start with a little bit of background on how WISE became what it is today. Two women from Maine joined a Habitat for Humanity trip to a small village in Zambia called Kauma in the western province, which is the poorest, most impoverished province in Zambia in the early 2000s. And, wanting to do good, wanting to help out and build homes, they were shocked by what they saw when they arrived. Us having worked in this field, we probably are not surprised by what they saw. The level of poverty in the village was substantial, but specifically for women and girls because of some of the laws in the district in Zambia and in a lot of Africa. Women were not allowed to own property. They were, a lot of the girls are married off at the age of 13 or 14, even though the laws had recently changed in that regard in Zambia. In these rural villages, there's no one there to enforce it. And quite frankly, when the poverty level is that high, everyone has to step in and help. As far as the sustainability, as far as the household income, and if you can't help, then marrying off your daughter is the easiest way, unfortunately, to be able to continue to provide for the rest of your family. So, and there was a very high rate of orphans in this community as well. So this is what they saw when they came in to build some simple homes, and they said, you know what, we can do more. There must be something we can do. And so they went and spoke to some of the women and said, well, how did you end up in these circumstances? A lot of the women have 7, 8, 9, 10 children, and there's no husband in the picture anymore for various reasons. And these women have not been educated or trained in any skill. So how do they provide for their families? So these two women from Maine came back to the States and said, we're going back and we have to do something. They started by bringing sewing machines with them. And that's where the vocational aspect of what WISE does today began. They said, well, you know what, you need a skill, you need a trade, you need to be able to provide for your family. So they brought sewing machines and taught them how to sew and some other similar skills. And that's where it all began. It evolved very quickly from them. They built a women's center, which is now run by local Zambian women. Everything that happens locally in the community is run by locals. And the only people who are paid for any of the work that WISE does are locals in Zambia. The rest of the organization, the board, is all volunteer. So we grew from some sewing machines and tailoring and things of this nature to what else can we do to help these women empower them and break this cycle of poverty, right? So that their daughters are not going through the same thing. What came next was some agricultural programs. So animal husbandry, a lot of these women, whether they inherited small farms from their husbands or from their families, we went through and taught some skills for animal husbandry. So teaching them how to sustain their farms and how to turn it into products that can be sold at market instead of just what's needed to raise your own family. So these, again, became some economic turning points for them. And then the last piece and most recent piece, in 2013, we started scholarships for secondary school scholarships. And these are to address, of course, the young girls. The country of Zambia only pays for education through 7th grade. So 7th grade, 13, 14, again, what happens when these families can't afford to put their children through their secondary school and continue their education? This is when we start to see the early pregnancy, early childhood marriage, and all of this. So WISE started paying for the scholarships for secondary schools. We started with 20 scholarships and have grown from there. We have a combination in the beginning of about two-thirds to one of girls versus boys, and I'll share with you why that is. Obviously, girls and women are the focus. But in the beginning, the hardest part of the scholarships was not actually getting the money. It was getting the parents to agree to let their children go off, in most cases, to Kauma Secondary School, to go off to wherever they were going to need to be, leaving the family. This was very unconventional. And those children, of course, would not be around to help provide for their siblings and help with the farms. So that was the most challenging part, and what WISE realized was by not only accepting girls into the program, but by allowing some boys who obviously had the grades for it and the need-based and the commitment to this process, the families were more open to letting the children try this, letting the girls and boys try it out. They saw the benefit of educating the boys, of course, and if someone was going to help, okay, we'll let the girls do it too. So at first, it was about 7 boys and 13 girls the first year that we provided secondary school scholarships. It grew from there. This year, 2019, 200 scholarships were given out for secondary schools alone, and about 133 of them are for girls. So the majority of them are for girls. WISE looks at the commitment for education as a 9-year commitment, not just secondary school, not just finishing high school. These students, they're the first in their communities, the first in their families to ever leave the village to get an education. A lot of them, when they go off to university, are the first from that province or anywhere in that area to attend that university. So the villages and the families are now starting to have such great pride in being able to send their students off, and we want them to reach their full potential. So the scholarships, when we commit to a child and going into 8th grade, that commitment, as long as they're willing and able, goes all the way through their high school years and their college years, whether they choose a vocational training after high school, university, whatever it might be. So we now have 20 students at various universities around Zambia. They're focusing on education, business, economics, nursing. A lot of them, no surprise, want to be in education. They want to be educators and be able to give back because of what they've received through this process. I want to share a couple of things about what WISE does and doesn't do. Perhaps it might be a little bit different from the way things are done in other areas, and why we think that this model is really special and is being so successful. The whole point of everything that is done here in this community, and we've now spread out beyond Kaoma to Lukulu and some other districts around the province, the Western Province. Sustainability is the key to everything. I'm sure we've all seen some programs who are well-meaning, but when they come into an area, they bring their resources and their people, and they work for 6 months or a year or 2 years, and then they leave and move on. And there's nothing left behind when there is a void that is left behind when those resources are pulled out. So starting from the ground up, we are not only helping the women and the girls in this community, but the community as a whole to become economically self-sustaining. The Women's Center that I mentioned is open to everyone in the community, not just the women. There's a library being built and added for everyone there. We're working on getting computers in there so that everyone feels like they are a part of this and they take great pride in what's happening in this community. The other thing is that when students agree, they have to sign an agreement to accept a scholarship. Part of that agreement is paying it forward. So when you go on to college, you're expected to come back, and it's individuals, everyone is different depending on what your career path is and what your educational choices are, but at some point you come back to your village and you give back to the students, to the children, to the families, to the community in that way. When this happens, they take such pride in that. There's leadership that's instilled in that process. They come back and mentor some of the students. And these students and families have such pride in these individuals who have gone out and made something of themselves. They see the income that they're earning, and the children now want to be like them. Right? So it's, of course, getting a lot easier for the parents, for us to convince the parents that this is something good, right? That there is good to come out of this. They're starting to see that return on investment. And so we are starting to end that cycle of poverty that we were talking about. The other really interesting thing is that, as I mentioned, everyone in the program, everyone associated in the program on the ground is local to the community. There are no external resources that have been brought in and paid for. Everything is local. And they are the ambassadors for this program. We think that we've built a sustainable model that we can share and take to other communities. That's our goal. One of the things we've started to do most recently is make broader connections to what is happening on the ground here in the United States. So we had a wonderful event with the Zambian Embassy last year. They're very excited to see what's happening in these rural communities that unfortunately their government officials can't even get to a lot of times to check up on them and see what's happening. So they're very excited about this. They're supporting the work that we're doing, and we're beginning to reach out to other Zambians in the United States to say, again, that pay it forward model, right? You may have someone in your community back home in Kaoma or in the Western Province who is being served by these educational scholarships or the training programs that are happening. And wouldn't you love to know about that? And would you like to be a part of this effort? So that is one of the latest things that we're doing. We're pretty excited about making all of these connections here and hopefully maybe be able to bring some of these individuals back. We also last summer, and I'll just end on some of the upcoming things that we've got going on. Last summer we brought a group of nurses to Kaoma. And so again, with that vocational training in mind, free medical screenings were provided to everyone in the village. And then they went to several of the local hospitals and nursing centers to share some of their skills and provide some ideas for instruction and methodology and efficiency to these nurses. And we did the same thing just a couple months ago, and Inger was on this trip, brought some educators from Notre Dame College in Baltimore. And so they worked on ELA, English language learning, worked with the students and the teachers on educational instruction and new methodologies. And they're really trying to, again, bridge these gaps and give everything we can so that these communities are self-sustaining and don't need any resources, right? The day that WISE leaves Kaoma is because this community is 100% self-sustaining. And we'll move on from there. So I will pause there and take any questions. Thank you.